If you have played this game for any amount of time, you know how elusive it can be to get into that zone, that phase where everything is clicking. You're not thinking about it. In fact, I've heard some describe it as they get to the end of the round and had no idea what they shot, and it turned out to be a really good score. That's the zone. But how in the world do we get there? And how do we stay there? And that's one of the reasons, that exploration is one of the reasons that I'm excited to talk to our two guests today, because they are the creators of In the Zone Secrets: How to Get in the Zone at a Flip of a Switch. Bo Watson and Shannon Shuskey joining us to kind of reveal the magician's secret. You know, you're probably going to get kicked out of the club if you guys give away all the tricks. So it's good to see you, both of you in North Carolina, where you never stop golfing and you're always in the zone, from what I understand. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I love it.
Yeah. Thanks, Bill, for
Well,
having us on. This is exciting.
well, glad to do it. And I want to start by having you define the zone. What is it?
Well, I love what you said. You're not thinking about it. One of the things that we talk about too is it's the caveman golf mentality, see ball, hit ball, because the less thoughts that you got going on in your head, the better muscle sequencing, for example, and because it can affect your coordination. And so that's one of the things. But also, the biggest thing is like within our program, we teach what's called psychoneuromuscular training, which we have a trigger, and it's kind of based very similar, like off of Pavlov's dogs, where if anybody has taken psychology 101, everybody knows this. Even we've worked with doctors that's been psychologists and stuff, and they're like, "Wow, I can't believe you put this together. This actually works as well." So, with that being said, being able to trigger the body to get in the zone, and that's kind of how Bo and I met as well, triggering the body, and he was like, "There's no way." But and he did what he just did there. He was laughing at me. He was like, "I'm going to prove you wrong," and he went out to prove me right.
Did you guys meet in a teacher-student relationship, or how did you first come together?
No, it's funny enough. My wife and I just switched churches, and when we were at this new church, Hope City, we got connected because we went to it was a ministry, more on how to actually pray. And Shannon's head of the ministry team, and I was like, wow, this is really interesting. I love the way that you're sharing God's word, and it's just, again, that could be another topic for later. But the thing that was so captivating was the truth behind it. And so I was like, I really want to get to know this guy. And so he and I, we go out to dinner one night, and we're at dinner having a casual conversation, and I was like, "Hey, what did you do? Like, what's your background?" And he said, "Well, I was formerly the national team manager for the U.S. national team in inline speed skating." I was like, "That's pretty cool. Well, what were your results?" "Well, I coached 142 national champions, 8 world champions, 2 Olympic medalists." I'm like, "Whoa, okay, that's impressive. That's like Hall of Fame worthy." So like, I'm intrigued. What'd you do? And he said, "Well, if you really want to know, I was able to get my speed skaters to trick their bodies into the zone." And I started laughing. And I said, please, I don't mean any disrespect, but you got to understand, like, I just stepped away from the game of golf 2 years ago. I shut down my golf school. I have quit the game. I don't have any intention of ever go back into the game. And you got to understand the reason why I quit the game was because of the mental side of the game. And I was like, look, golf's the hardest sport in the world. There's no way, whatever you have is going to work for the game of golf. I respect that it worked well for you in speed skating, but there is just no chance because, look, I've read all the mental books. I've read mental books outside the game of golf and other sports. They all talk about what flow state and the zone is, but nobody has ever shown a step-by-step process on how to actually get there. And you're telling me you figured it out. And he said, yes. I still don't believe you. And, it was at that point, we kind of talk about this in the book too, but he gets out his phone, Bill, and he's getting out his phone and he's sitting here and he's going through and like swiping, and then he shows me a screenshot. And then he goes to another person, shows me another screenshot, and he goes to another one, and he shows me another text. And these are texts from his world champions and Olympic medalists and national champions, and they're all saying the same thing. They found a custom trigger that was getting them into the zone or in flow state, is more scientific, appropriate term. And I was like, wow, okay, well, that's really cool, but I still don't believe it's going to work for a game of golf. And then, we talked more about it, and we can go there more so if we want to, but I basically went out and tried to prove him wrong. And funny enough, I said to him, I was like, I'm the prime candidate to see if this works for a game of golf. And I said, here's why. I haven't touched a club in 2 years. And what I'll do, Shannon, is I'll take what you're about to share with me. I'll go out to the course. I'm not going to practice. I'm not even going to go to the range. I'm not even going to warm up before the round. I'm going to go cold turkey, hit a few putts straight to the first tee. Bill, I played 8 rounds that year, 6 out of 8 rounds under par. My last 9-hole round I played, I shot 4 under, lipped out 3 other birdies, and it could have been even lower. And I went from a 2.4 index to a plus 1.7 within a 6-month time span. So,
Okay, so that's, mind blowing. That's fantastic, and it's also confusing because the concept of thinking through a process to not think is hard to process through, through this old cranium. And I'm sure some of our audience are thinking, no, wait a minute. That's like telling the people at your gathering, whatever you do not picture a large pink elephant. Do not picture this in your mind,
Absolutely.
right? Because that's the only thing you can fixate on. So Shannon, give us kind of the introductory to this journey that that has such potential on the other side of it.
Yeah, so my background also, I played soccer, played semi-pro. So I was fast. I was pretty fast. And so with speed skating, the kind of give you background of the team that I was on, we had over 22 national champions on our team. So I was racing against the who's who. I was older than most of them at the time because I came in I came in kind of late. I was like in my 30s, so to speak. And I noticed that there was a big disconnect, very similar like in golf, where you hear all the time, I can shoot lights out when I'm on the range, but I can't apply it when I'm on the course, right? So what I was doing, and I had the same mentality. I mean, the same thing that was going on in my brain was if I had shoes on, I could beat everybody hands down, and because we would do races and stuff like that. Then when I put skates on, I would get last off the starting line. And so then I figured out using a trigger with mental imagery and even emotion. And we talk about this in the book. We'll probably get this in a little bit later. And so what happened was I started doing my mental imagery, getting my mental reps in. And within a month and a half, I was winning all my starts. And then not even 2 months later, I was beating everybody at meets off the line. And not just that, I got to where I could place myself anywhere off the starting line, which is extremely fast.
So is mental imagery, is that the picturing of yourself in a successful moment? Let me have you define that a bit more for us.
Yeah, so mental imagery is you're doing it through your eyes. Like, for example, if I had a GoPro and put it on my head, it would be as if I was skating, for example, or if a golfer, it would be as if they were looking down and they could see the dimples of the ball. They could see the grass blades. They can see their club. And you want it to be as real as possible. You want to have all your 5 senses involved. But then we actually took it to another level. But it's actually, the scientific term is called kinesthetic mental imagery. So we also wanted to add not just your 5 senses, but limb movement. But we also want to add one of the most important parts too is your emotion. Add emotion to your mental imagery. Excuse me. And so that's what I was doing when I was doing my mental imagery. It became so real. When you do the mental imagery, your brain cannot process, because it's actually, when I say process, whether it's real or if it's fake, when you're doing mental imagery, it becomes so real in your mind because it's working with the motor sensory of your brain. We've actually had a lot of our clients actually increase their yardage by 20 yards just by doing mental imagery. That's the power of it.
Okay,
And so
so
that's,
I'm sorry, Bo, when you first hear Shannon explaining this, are you getting it right away? Is the light bulb clicking on, or are you thinking, well, I don't have any idea what you're talking about? How was the first round of it for you?
It's one of my favorite things this year in this story because, again, going back to that conversation we initially had, I still didn't believe him. And I said, "You're full of it. There's just no way it's going to work for the game of golf." And you got to understand, Bill, I'm coming from a background of being trained under some of the absolute best and the best in the game of golf. And I'll just share just real briefly. I come from the tree of Morad, heavily influenced by Mac O'Grady. Any golf instructor, like in the top 50, that's basically the who's who in this game, they all have in some way, form, or fashion been influenced by Mac's teaching. So here's the thing. Even though I was blessed to have some amazing instructors and understanding the swing inside and out, the fact is I still did not believe that this could work for golf. And so I share a lot of the skepticism that many people are on here listening right now do. And that's why I initially went out and said, I just don't believe this is going to work. But I'll tell you what changed it for me. It was when the conversation shifted to him asking me, "Have you ever heard of the study Pavlov's dogs?" I said, "Yeah, I remember taking that." And funny enough, it was the only class in college I actually failed, which was Psychology 101. And I actually go back and I ace it. But the crazy thing was, I do remember Pavlov's dogs very vividly. And for those of you that aren't familiar, Pavlov's dogs was basically the Russian scientist had a dog. They would initially either turn on a light or they'd ring the bell. And then after they did that, the dog would then be given food. But through that process of training with the custom trigger, what was fascinating is that it was getting to a point where the dog would start seeing this light or hear the bell sound, and he would start salivating. And I vividly remember that in college, and it was one of the studies, what's called classical conditioning, that really stood out to me. And I said, "Yeah, I definitely remember that." And he said, "Okay." And he said, well, he took me through a very in-depth exercise where he walked me through like this thing where he's like, "All right, I want you to picture yourself in front of the fridge." I was like, "Okay, I can do that." And so he's like, "Here, I want you to now picture yourself open your fridge door. Can you feel the cold air?" I said, "Yeah, I can feel it." And he said, "Okay, I placed an orange on the second shelf and it's right behind, the sour cream." And I was like, "Okay, can you see it?" I said, "Yeah, I can see it." And he's like, "All right, I want you to reach around it and I want you to grab the orange and pull it out." And he said, "Okay, now can you feel the orange and can you see it?" And I said, "Yeah, I can do that." And he said, "Okay, I want you to start peeling it." So I'm sitting here and I'm starting to do everything he's telling me to do, right? And then I get to the part where it's been peeled, and he's like, "All right, I want you to take one of the slices, and now I want you to bring it close to your mouth." And he's like, "Can you feel it and can you see it?" And I said, "Yeah." "Now I want you to bring it even closer, and can you smell it?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Now I got an important question for you. Is your mouth watering?" I said, "Wow, yeah, it actually is, and it's watering right now as we speak." Uh, but here's what's cool. Even if somebody on here right now doesn't even relate to that, and even me walking you through that didn't even cause your mouth to water, I guarantee you've had a conversation at some point in the past where you and your friend were talking about this amazing restaurant or this incredible dessert, and you just through the process of talking about it, your mouth watered. Well, hello, that's beauty of classical conditioning in humans. So it is a involuntary response to that. And what's so amazing about this is that our system is a blend of classical conditioning and operant conditioning, that through that process of using mental imagery, making it so real. And again, we can go deeper in this, but when they start training their custom trigger to that, they can then get themselves into a hyper focused state when they're actually out playing. It's really, really simple. Sounds very complex on the surface, but when you really get in it and you start applying it, it really is simple.
Let me read just a quick excerpt from the book In the Zone. This book was created to collapse time and accelerate your path to uncaging your true potential. And while this book will help you do just that, there's no easy button in golf and life. Bo writes, "What is in this book is what I wished someone had given to me when I was a junior golfer with big dreams. The many failures I experienced in the game would have been avoided had I known what I now know." So Shannon, this is a pretty epic journey that we are inviting people to enter into, just not just reading through the book, but kind of committing to going through the exercises. And one of the vagaries of this bizarre game that we love so much that I've experienced is that there are times when I can be playing really quite well and successfully blocking out distractions or the things that would bring me back to reality until one of my buddies says something like, man, you know, you're 2 under through 12 or something like that. And then all of a sudden, here comes triple, double, double. And you're like, whoa, what just happened? Is because I started listening to, I guess, the input from external forces instead of kind of staying in whatever it was that had gotten me to that point. So I know you've addressed this and you do it with your other athletes and with golfers as well. How do we develop the barrier to not allow something to rattle us out of whatever the zone looks like for each of our games?
Yeah, I call that we call that the expectation trap. And a lot of times you get destiny disease, so to speak, and you start thinking about that more. And then what you're doing is you're focusing on the outcome versus staying in the moment. I like to use this acronym WIN, WIN, which means what's important now. That's the most important thing. Your score, your process is what got you there. So let's not lose sight of the process versus, you know, the outcome. And that's what's going on is we start focusing on that versus necessarily keeping our mind on the now.
Yeah, I'll add to that because here's the science of flow states. That's a more scientific, appropriate term for this. We know from neuroscience in the last few years that's been really fascinating because they have now proven that when someone is in flow state, we have what's called low theta and low alpha wave brain wave activity. To put that real simply, all that simply means is that we have very little conscious thought happening. When we start introducing thoughts where we hit a negative shot and now we're dwelling on that shot and we don't fully release it, we're now thinking about a past event. Or we start thinking, in your case, if we start thinking about what can happen or what if I keep going down this path, I'm going to shoot my low score of the day. And then we start getting future focus on the outcome. We are now out of the present moment. To be in flow state, we are so infatuated with the present moment. My friend Sean Foley said this one time, and I absolutely agree with him. He said, we're always in the zone. We just take ourselves out of it more times than not.
Yeah, I would agree
And
with
it's so
that.
true. It's so true.
Okay, so we have these inner voices, especially in golf. Maybe it's true for Olympic athletes, and maybe it's true for high achievers, but I know for sure it's true with golfers. The inner coach versus the inner critic, and you write about that in this book. Walk us through the differences between the two and how we can silence that inner critic, because quite often that's the one that results in accumulated scorecard disasters.
Absolutely. And yeah, so what we did was this. We have found that you become more aware when you put a name to some of the thoughts that's going on in our head. And so, for example, you've got negative thoughts that are self-sabotaging, like like if you hit a bad shot and then all of a sudden you berate yourself, for example, that is what we call the inner critic. And then the inner coach is one that's always going to be pushing you forward, walking in your true identity, so to speak. So then if you put a name on it, you become more aware of those thoughts. That's why we labeled it inner critic and inner coach, because then now it has a name and okay, I don't need to listen to this name. So you basically have three thoughts in your head, and that is the inner coach, the inner critic, and then our own thoughts. The own thoughts could be like, I need to take the trash out, when I get home or something like that. It's a random thought. So then what happens is it becomes our responsibility, our ability to be able to respond to that negative thought that goes on. And who can do that the best, a lot of times is can be playing their best rounds of golf. But at the same time, I ask this, can we control our negative thoughts? And the answer is no, because if we can control them, then we would never have a negative thought, right?
By definition, yes.
Yeah, right. But here's the thing, the way you silence them is how you respond to that negative thought. So then it doesn't have as much impact on you mentally, which also can have an effect on you physically. For example, there's a study that came out of Harvard and Georgetown where it says that when you speak positive over your life or anything, for example, it has a 10% more likely of a chance that it'll affect you some way, somehow. However, in that same study, they found out that if you speak negatively, it's going to come, it has a 40 to 70 percent more that it will affect you some way, somehow. So the biggest thing is we change our behavior. Our past does not predict our future. Our behavior predicts our future. So then when those negative thoughts come in, if we entertain them, it becomes a stronghold. And that's where we get in the loop going into what we call the negative, like a negative habit loop. And we find ourselves going through that. But then when we respond positively, it takes us out of that.
You know, and I am thinking through this range of personalities that love to play this game. We've got folks that are mild-mannered, polite, composed, slow to anger, and that's on this end of the scale. And then you've got on the other end of the scale, the guy with, usually the guy with pent-up rage, a club thrower or club snapper, a loud cursor. Well, I mean, you've got this spectrum, right? You've got this wide range. Does all of this fit no matter where you are on that spectrum, or do you have to kind of be predisposed to some, I don't know, some openness or some meekness or some sort of personality that absorbs teaching as opposed to thinking you already know everything and you yell at anybody who tells you otherwise?
The short answer to that is yes, it applies to everyone. Because one of the more fascinating studies that we came across, and we'll put this in our new revised, updated version. Yes, we're already working on that as we speak in the next few years, because we came across a study after we did our initial research for this book, and it's really fascinating. They found that if you speak negatively, it will also shut down portions of your brain without us going into detail. But really what it does, it affects your coordination. So if you speak negatively, not only does it impact you in so many other different ways in terms of like lowering and elevating your heart rate. I mean, there's so many things that it does there, but they found, and this is what was so fascinating to me, is as a coach, is that it actually affects your coordination. Well, what does that mean? Well, golf is a very coordinated sport, and that's true for any other sports too, is that it's very heavily hinged on your kinematic sequence. So if your sequencing is off, your shot dispersion pattern just got a lot wider. And so your bad misses just became even worse. And we know in this game that that's not a good recipe for success. I love what David Duvall said one time. Good golf is the sum of a bunch of average golf shots. That came from my friend Scott Fawcett, who runs Decade, but that is one of the most interesting true statements I've ever heard over the years. And Arnold Palmer said it in another way. He said, the more I practice, the luckier I get. Like, that's the key to great golf. It's not about hitting the perfect shots all the time. It's about how do you make your misses better? And if you can do that, you're going to play some really good golf.
Yeah. And another example is, you know, you're getting ready to you're going through your pre-shot routine and you're walking up to the ball, and then all of a sudden you say, don't hit it in the bunker. Well, again, what happens is with neuroscientists have actually hooked up where they do brain scans of he's done over 12,000 brain scans of golfers, and come to find out when you say the word don't, your brain level activity is focusing on two things, and the target and the don't part. So then we have this brain activity. But then if you want to add a swing thought in there, oh my goodness. So what you're doing is you are actually, like what Bo said, you are affecting the muscle sequencing and your coordination because of all the thoughts that are going in your head. So if you hear don't hit it in there, our brain cannot process that because it increases the brain activity. So what we need is we need to be focused more solidly on the target. So I would suggest this at the same time. It's your game. It's not nobody else's game. Step away from the ball and redo your pre-shot routine when you start thinking that way. So what we're just trying to do is we're just trying to create it to where you have a lot less brain activity. And again, that comes down to the caveman golf, see ball, hit ball.
Well, you write about this breaking of the internal thermostat, and I was reminded that in climate control world, the thermostat sets and controls the temperature. The thermometer reflects the temperature. I know a lot of golfers who are thermometers. They just simply reflect whatever they're feeling that day. You'll hear, I can't hit anything but a hook. I got no chance, or a big slice, and they're basically predicting what you're about to see because of the way that they have reflected the temperature. What is the internal thermostat and why do we need to break it?
Yeah, in short, it's kind of like this, and then and Bo will capitalize on this as well. And so it's kind of like this. Internal thermostat for golf. Let's say if you shoot an 80, you're used to shooting roughly in the 80 to 85 range. What happens is we get out on the golf course and we start lights out. Well, then we're not used to, because it's a good feeling. It feels good, like what you said. You know, like your golfing buddies say something, for example, to you, that hey, you're playing really good. You might shoot your lowest round. So then what happens is we start expecting something negative come out of it, and then all of a sudden, by the end of the round, you know, we turn around, we get to we're so negatively impacted, so to speak, that we're actually shooting the same score that we did. And the same is true vice versa. You start out bad, you know, you do double bogey, and then all of a sudden you start playing lights out, and then again, you start shooting the same thing. So then we have to figure out, okay, because we've all hit good shots, right? And then we say, okay, this is normal. This is how we play. So, Bo, you want to go ahead and
Yeah, I think what's so fascinating about the internal thermostat, this is something that I struggled heavily with in my junior golf days. And I talk about this in the book as well. You know, I can't tell you how many times I would start out in my late middle school, early high school days where I would be 3, 4 under through like 7 or 8 holes. And what would happen is I would start at that point I start daydreaming and I'd be like, man, today's gonna be my low round. I can't wait to tell my grandparents, you know, the ones that actually introduced me to the game. And I could already start basically seeing myself in the moment where I'm celebrating and we're going out to dinner and, you know, I'm telling my parents, can't wait to see their smile and I can't wait to, you know, make them proud of me and everything. And then what's so fascinating within the next a hole or two, you know, the train comes off the tracks. I mean, it happened so many times. It was just basically sad to think about. But, you know, one of the things that really got me to believe in this system, because I struggled with it all the way throughout my career and up until the point where I shut down my golf school, Bill.
Hmm.
And even as a swing coach, even being gifted, being around gifted minds, I mean, it was still sad for me to go out and see the same pattern and still fold down the stretch. And I'll tell you, one of the rounds that really got me to believe in this was I was playing Tanglewood Champions course. It's a course that had a PGA Championship. They used to have the Senior Champions Tour event there for a long period of time. So it was a good course and a tough track. And I'm playing from the tips, and I start out bogey bogey. And this is during one of the 8 rounds that I'm going out to try to prove Shannon wrong. Okay, back in 2018, and I start bogey bogey. Now, the old Bo would have just been like, all right, well, you know, I guess we'll just write off this front 9. You know, we'll just see if we can get it together on the back 9. No, I still kept trusting in my power talk, still kept trusting in the process. And I go 4 under over the next 7 holes, and I turn that front side 2 under. I would not have been able to do that in the past. And so that was one of the really big belief turning moments for me personally. And it's one of those things where when it comes back to the internal thermostat, like what Shannon was describing, and kind of really take this point further for people that are listening to this, the reason why it's like no matter what you do, you always end up in that same range of scores is because it's uncharted territory for you, so to speak.
Yeah.
What happens is you basically are surprised at how well you're playing. And because you're surprised, what it does is it communicates to your internal thermostat something's off. And
Yes.
then before you know it, within the next 2 holes, you hit that snap hook off the tee, you're OB, you make double or triple, and then you follow it up with another bogey. And then you're like, I can't believe this happened. And then we start berating ourselves. And then before you know it, at the end of the round, you're always back where you always are.
Yeah. The fact that you're rarely surprised when you're playing poorly, but frequently surprised when you're playing well, I would think, Shannon, has something to do with how we've calibrated our scales to start with, right? Perhaps we do better if we'd be expecting a better performance than surprised and stunned by a better performance. I will recall my best round of my life. And I generally play between a 5 and a 6, maybe sometimes 6.5 is my sort of the fluctuation for me in my game, my index. A handful of years ago, though, I'm having the round of my life, and I am standing on the, I think, 16th tee. Again, not thinking about anything, just playing well, making everything. And my buddy says, "Do you know you're 5 under?" And this is at my dream course. This is at Arcadia Bluffs in northern Michigan, and I'm just playing lights out. And he tells me that, and I stop. I'm on the tee, just come off a birdie on 15. I'm on the tee, and I was so shocked that I was playing so well. You know what happened next, just as Bo was describing. You just all of a sudden explode. And I think I took a double there, and I ended up, the only reason I shot 69 that day was that on 18 for my second shot, it's a blind shot into the green. And my buddy who was with me, he said, the flag is lined up with that steeple on the clubhouse. And I missed the shot, an entire steeple over to the right. And I was like, oh my goodness. Well, we get up to the green, and it turns out he had given me the wrong angle, and I had hit a great shot in, and people were up there, and there was a little smattering of play. I made that birdie to go to 69. I was so in my own head at that point. I was expecting complete disaster, and then I was delivering on complete disaster. This thermostat thing fascinates me, right? So take us inside the doctor's office here, put us on the couch, and help us all kind of get through how we set our expectations, and then how we interact with reality when we're in the middle of the competition.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
great question. I will say this, and this is where it starts, number one, with your identity as a player. And we talk about this in the book, and one of the absolute best places to get someone to shift into the new identity and get to that new level in their game is you have to understand the story that we tell about the SAT student. This was a student that was 16 years old at that point. That's when you need to take the SAT. But this is a student that was hanging around the wrong kids, was partying, doing all the wrong things, and also sat in the back of class, cut up in class, all that, right? And he's like, all right, fine, I just need to go take this SAT. Well, he goes and takes the SAT. Well, come to find out, he actually scores I think it was a 1480 out of a possible 1600. And so his mom was like, son, did you cheat? And he's like, well, I tried, but the chairs were too far apart. And so he decides to, at this point, sit in front of the class, starts taking his studies seriously. He cuts all of his bad influences and his friends. His teachers are like, wow, well, maybe we missed a boat on this kid. Maybe we need to pour more into him, right? And so they start pouring more into him. Well, fast forward, he goes to an Ivy League school, and fast forward a few more years, he's now the president or CEO of one of the most successful magazine companies in the world. Now, 13 years go by. He gets a letter in the mail. His wife puts it on the counter and was like, hey, are you going to open this? It's from the SAT board. Well, he opens the letter, he reads it, and they say, hey, every few years we do a periodical review, and we found that you were one of 12 students sent the wrong SAT score when you initially took it. You actually, in fact, made a 740, not a 1480. Now, we have to take a step back here and look at this, because a lot of people believe that their past will predict their future.
Yeah.
That's not true in this case, because the reality was he was actually still a 740 student. But because he believed he was a 1480 student and started walking out the behaviors of a 1480 student, everything else fell in place. Now, how do we bring this back to golf? Well, here's the reality of the internal thermostat, and this is what everybody's struggling with. They're going out and playing their game, believing and acting and walking out the behaviors of whatever fill-in-the-blank handicap they are.
Interesting.
And this is why the internal thermostat never really moves for them, because they always see themselves as fill-in-the-blank handicap.
It's funny you say that. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Bo. It's funny you say that, because the USGA perpetuates some of that.
Mm-hmm.
by telling you you're only supposed to play to your handicap 25% of the time. And I'm an advocate of people having an index so that you can have a level playing field. But it's interesting to hear you describe how we operate cognitively. And then I realize I'm not even supposed to play to that number. But what if I was supposed to play to that number? Right. And I don't know if that was part of your process as you were improving and going from, going to a plus index, but why should I only be there 25% of the time? Right. So is that one of the speed bumps that we're putting in our own ways? And in this case, it's kind of almost an industry standard speed bump.
100%. It again kind of goes back to part of like what Sean Foley said. We're always in the zone, but we take ourselves out of it more times than not, and so we get in our own way. And the reason why a lot of people struggle is they're basically putting restrictor plates on their own game, so to speak. Whereas if we want to get to that next level, the only way that we're going to be able to do that is we have to first change our belief about our game and what's possible. And when we work with our clients, college players and tour players, let's use our college players for an example. One of the things that we like to ask our students and our clients is, why do you play the game? Because you have to start there first, right? And for them, I know they're playing at a high level, but you'll understand, I'll bring it all back full circle for everybody else that's listening to this. But for many of them, they'll tell us, I want to play professionally. Okay, cool. So here's the thing. If you want to play professionally, let's fast forward 5 years. Let's bring the SAT story home for them. We will say, okay, 5 years from now, you're a major champion. You've won 4 times on the PGA Tour, as far as majors, 4 majors. You've won also 15 times, just regular PGA Tour events. And that's your resume 5 years from now. And they're like, okay, now I want you to bring that player back into the current moment. And I want you to behave and walk out and play like a major champion. That's when they initially get their breakthrough. Because at that point, what they're doing is they're now walking out the behaviors on a day in, day out basis, and how they practice, how they train, how they're doing their nutrition, what they're doing with their workout schedule, all those things that would be characteristic of a person that's already a 4-time major winner and 15-time winner on the PGA Tour. And so when they walk out those behaviors in the day-to-day, then what's possible for them in terms of their scores is no longer held captive based on their faulty belief of their past performance. It's just like the SAT kid. He was reality a 740 student, but he was walking and believing that he was a 1480 student. That's the key. That's the secret to them getting their ultimate breakthrough. Now, how do we bring it to the everyday golfer? Well, let's talk about the 15 handicap, because that's kind of like the average handicap that the USGA throws out, right? So for the person that shoots in the upper 80s, for you, what would it look like if you behaved and walked out every single day in every round that you played as if you were the club champion at your home club? Well, you would start acting different. You would actually probably have a consistent pre-shot routine for every single shot that you play. Because the biggest mistake or biggest error I see a lot, and I know this is going to ring true for everybody on here, what is the number one complaint I get all the time when I'm on a conversation or a call with our golfers in our community? You know what they always ask for? I'm inconsistent. I want more consistency. Okay, yeah, that's a pretty broad statement, right? Well, if you're wanting consistency, how's your pre-shot routine?
Yeah. Or your warm
It's
up.
inconsistent. So how can we expect consistency if your approach and process is inconsistent? You can't.
Yeah. There's a lot of parking lot pros out there. They just pull in and head right to the first tee. By the way, if you are going to adopt the mindset of being the club champion, might I suggest don't park in his or her spot just yet, because the rest of the club might not be fully on board with your new approach to the game, and you could find yourself in some sort of a sanctioning moment. But Shannon, I would love to have you take us kind of through a practical, a pre-round pattern that we could adopt. I know that the title of the book includes "At the Flip of a Switch," but we know that that switch has got some components to it. So help us, like on a practical preparation basis, what does this look like to prepare to get to this zone?
Well, one is a great example is like what Bo talked about, changing the behavior. And one of the ways that you can change your behavior is, for example, doing mental imagery is huge. It can change your game. But then at the same time, have you ever thought about, all right, this is one way I want to attack the thermostat, like what we were just talking about. Do your mental imagery of a full round, but write down birdies. You know, on a physically write down, take the actual scorecard that you have and you're getting your mental reps in and write down birdies.
Hmm.
That'll actually help prepare you because your separation is in your preparation. You know, if we're meticulous about our preparation, then once we get into the rounds, we're going to be able to perform at a much higher level because of that. And relentlessly pursue the process every single time, like Bo said, because the process is what got you the good score in the first place. Is going in your process. And now if we now here's the thing, what's your process? Well, let's make a list. Let's write it down. What is your process? What is in your pre-shot routine? What do you want to have? And I would definitely suggest if you're doing a swing change, only have one swing thought and let that be dial that in first and then move to your next swing thought. Don't have more than that because you're going to sabotage your game because then we start getting into the left part of the brain. And the right part of the brain is when you're in the zone. And when you start thinking about technique, that's when you start sabotaging your game. So just have that. So that would be another part of the process is maybe one swing thought, you know, and then like what Bo talked about, the physical trigger, get your trigger dialed into your process because you're not used to doing it, you know, going into your round and get those process in there. So, and setting those process goals and then, all right, let that be my scorecard versus a physical scorecard. This is what I did. You know what I mean? And let those process goals take you to the next level.
Yeah, and we know that in our audience, we have some very serious competitive golfers, and then we have the casual. I play every Thursday afternoon in a league. It's 9 holes. It's after work. I'm just glad to get out and play. So we have quite a wide array of intensity, I guess, to our players. But everybody shares something in common. They're all hoping to shoot their best round ever, even if they haven't put in the time, if they haven't done the practice. This game doesn't pay off if you don't invest into it. But I know that some of the prescriptions in the book for a warm up can take quite a while. You know, some of them are 20, 30, 40 minutes because you're preparing as if you were a tour pro and they're preparing for a couple hours before they go out and play. Uh, let's do the condensed version though, if we could. Let's prepare that more casual golfer, and they may not begin, you know, they may not be on the cusp of being invited to play at Augusta, but maybe their team is in contention for their league title or whatever it is, and we just want to get them into a better spot than they've been, even as a 15 or whatever their index may be. Is there a condensed version that would kind of fit the definition of flipping that switch so that you can be in the right spot when you compete?
100%. And this is one of my favorite things about this system. It's the one thing that I proved for me personally. Remember, I didn't physically practice. So for like the weekend warrior, the weekend golfer, just the once a week type player, to elaborate this is one of my favorite case studies, and it's actually John Norvell. Is up in northern Michigan, and this is a guy that, just like for many people, very well for him, he was going through a master's in biblical studies, and so his time was like non-existent. So like he would play like just once a week, no practice whatsoever. This guy that was in the upper 80s, low 90s, and the game was frustrating for him to the point where he was not really having fun and wasn't really keeping score anymore. Like that's where he was before he started working with us.
Hmm.
Now, the beautiful thing about this is it hard work? No, it's not hard work to do what we lay out in the book. It's just simply taking a few minutes here and there throughout your day that you find spare time. We can always find 3 or 4 minutes or in between tasks, things like that, and just doing mental reps. And that's what John did. John goes in the first month from upper 80s down to high 70s. Second month, his average score is 75. And then his third month, he shot his lifetime low at the age of 71. I think he shot 70. And since then, he's actually broke that and shot 69. And his handicap's like down in the low single digits. I can't remember the exact index, but he's playing some of the best golf of his life. But the biggest thing about that is from a practical standpoint, You don't have to physically practice and put in a ton of time to really see the fruit of this. The key is making it so real with the kinesthetic mental imagery and doing everything that we lay out in the foundation of psychomuscular training chapter. I mean, it's just basically what we call training the dog within you. You know, we just need to go out there and do mental reps. One of the common questions we get all the time is like, what should I visualize? Like, what should I be working on? Well, it's really simple. When you go practice on the range, what do? Well, you hit multiple clubs. Or if you go to the short game area, you're hitting a variety of different shots. Okay, let's go do those in our mind. And so that's the simplicity of it. But when it comes to the chapter, you know, how do we prepare for a round? You know, we lay out, you know, the ideal hour and a half before. Then we talk about the 30 minutes. And then we also talk about if you only have 5 minutes before a round and still see the benefit. And we can even do this with mental reps too. But there's several ways that people can do this, even with their busy life and their busy schedule. They can still see the fruit of this.
You know, I love the application, obviously, to the game. And I also know that our lives off the golf course are filled with distractions. They're filled with these wrestling matches that pit expectations versus performance versus family pressures. I mean, all of those different things. And I know that you get into this in the book as well, the life application to it and the faith application to all of this, which is one of the reasons that I was most excited to connect with you guys and talk about all of this, because I love to have insight that can help me on the golf course and then help me off the golf course as I walk a path of being, you know, a man of faith, a husband, a grandpa, a dad, all those different things. Um, in a kind of a quick nutshell, can you guys summarize the life application to the In the Zone Secrets program?
Yeah, Shannon, you want to take a stab or you want me?
Yeah, well, here's it. I mean, you think about different things. Like, for example, we did talk about the thermostat. Well, what about your business? How are you there? You know, here's the thing. Let's say you're a couple, and you know, you and your wife, or if you're a lady listening to this, you and your husband. Um, what level would you say that you know your spouse? Is it an elementary level? Is it a middle school level? Is it a high school level? Or do you have a PhD in knowing that? And it's the same thing as like you're pushing your life in there. And like with the thermostat, it helps you break some of those things that's in your life. You know, for example, a man for is one of these things that we have, unfortunately, is not being able to supply for our family.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then you have a financial thermostat as well. You can apply the thermostat in every area of your life. You know, your thermostat in your marriage. Where are you at? Your thermostat in your business. You know, little things like that. So that's the beautiful thing about being able to apply it in every single area. Also, we talk about E plus R equals O, and it's the event plus your response that equals your outcome mentality. It's how you respond to those events, you know, and you can use that in everyday life, in business, in your family, everything, to take you there. Bo, do you want to speak on that as well?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many life applications that we speak to in this book, and honestly, that was one of the most important things to us personally, that we don't see in a lot of, like, I guess, mental game books in the game of golf, and then also in sports in general, is that a lot of times life is happening, whether we are, you know, recognizing it or not. And so I don't really see, we didn't see this, and I've read a ton of books over the years, but not many people are talking to the struggles that we're bringing off the golf course into our rounds.
Mm.
And so we highlight several stories throughout our book on this and how to actually manage and deal with that. But like the reality is, like, you know, this one particular lady was going through a divorce, and she was struggling with that, carrying all the weight of that. the depression from that. There were so many things that were going on for her personally that actually spilled over into her game and was affecting her performance on the course. And so when we addressed that and we got to the heart of it, she was able to have the joy of the game come back to her and start having fun again. And honestly, why do we play this game?
Hmm.
We obviously play it because we want to have fun, right? We don't want it to be, something that we don't enjoy, or why would we be doing it? And so again, at the end of the day, our heart is that for everybody to play and love this game, but even more so, become a better human being. And there's a deeper level to that too. But I mean, that's what gets us excited and jump out of bed every day, is when we can actually help clients and help people that read our book and people that come into contact with our brand, that they get to a point where they're having and loving life again.
Yeah, and another example too is we had a guy who was on our worship team, and he actually would almost have panic attacks going on there. So we're talking about in the book we talk about how to break anxiety, but it's so he said, "Hey, I know, Shannon, that you're a mental performance coach. You think you can help me?" I said, "Yeah, let's go have lunch." We go have lunch. We get done with the lunch. I said, "Hey, can I pray for you?" And I prayed for him, and then literally 2 weeks later, he comes back, and after I shared with him a bunch of stuff about how to reframe the mind and do all that stuff as well on top of the prayer, he comes back and he goes, "Man, I didn't have to take my medicine. I'm not taking my medicine anymore." And he was totally set free from the anxiety and the panic attacks that he had. He also had a fear of flying. And then come to find out, the week after that, he flew to Las Vegas with no problems, no anxiety pills, nothing, zero. And he comes back, he's like, "Man, this is awesome." So then I say, "Hey, can I get your testimony for our book?" You cannot make this up, what I'm getting ready to say. I did not know this about him. He didn't reveal this to me when we were talking. He goes, "Yeah." So he writes out his testimony, and I receive it, and my mouth drops and jaw drops. You know where all this panic attack started? In Pinehurst, in North Carolina. He was a caddy. He was a caddy, and that's where he actually was going down reading a putt. And when he was reading a putt, he had a huge panic attack and literally walked off the course.
Oh my goodness.
And it didn't happen once, but it happened 3 other times. So then he stopped caddying. So we're talking about applying this to our life outside. Yeah. I went through a huge depression time where I was in my bed for 3 days and couldn't get up out of it.
Mm.
But walking in some of the things that we teach in our book, I was totally set free from depression. So let's do here's a very simple definition. And if people apply it, it actually makes it very simple. What is depression? Is someone that is obsessed with the past. What is anxiety? Is someone that is obsessed with the future.
Hmm.
What is optimal performance? Someone that's obsessed with the now. You can apply that to golf and you're going to be a much better player, but you can apply that to life, and guess what? You're going to be a much better person.
The website that you all need to visit is inthezonesecrets.com. And there's a number of items that are all part of a packet. Of course, there's the book, In the Zone Secrets, but there's an audio book, there's a digital workbook that are all part of this whole thing. And they've got such a great value to all of it. I want to encourage everybody to go and check that out. And as both Shannon and Bo can tell you, I'm not on commission, and we're not getting a cut of this. I just think it's worth investigating. And the best way to do that is to go to the website, inthezonesecrets.com. Guys, it's fascinating. It's fascinating. And I cannot wait to see how this, as it reaches more and more people, how your audience grows and how the impact can be felt. Yes, on the golf course, but my goodness, I mean, if you can help change some family dynamics, some individual anxiety and depression dynamics, it's even more of a win than it would be if you went out and shot your best round ever. So I really appreciate the insight. Thanks for sharing it with us. And hopefully a lot of our audience will come and check out what you've been working on.
Yeah. Thanks for having us on, Bill. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, it's been awesome. Thank you so much.